The first thing you need to understand about humans is that they are, without question, completely insane. I say this not as an insult, mind you, but as a Kavrithian xenobiologist who has spent the better part of 17 cycles studying these bizarre primates. My name is Telvik, and I have witnessed things that would make your sensory nodes curl inward with disbelief. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened in the Goron Valley. Let me set the scene for you. The colony on Terravex 3 was supposed to be a quiet research outpost. Peaceful. Boring. Even. We had a mixed population of about 40 beings. Mostly Kavrithians like myself, a few Drenali merchants, some Polthan engineers, and exactly 3 humans. 3. That was supposed to be a manageable number. The humans were part of an exchange program, because apparently the Galactic Council thought it would be educational to sprinkle these chaos engines throughout civilized space. Educational. That is what we call it now, after the lawsuits have been settled. Our 3 humans were Marcus Webb, a botanist who spent most of his time talking to plants as if they could understand him. They could not, I checked. Then there was Elena Frost, a security officer who seemed nice enough until you realized she exercised by doing something called rock climbing without safety equipment. For fun. And finally, there was little Kira Webb, Marcus's daughter, who was 7 years old by human reckoning. Now, Kira was a tiny thing, barely reaching my thorax joint, with these huge brown eyes and dark hair that her father could never quite keep tidy. She liked to draw pictures of the local wildlife and ask approximately 9,000 questions per solar rotation. Exhausting, but harmless. Or so I thought. The trouble started on what should have been a routine survey mission. Marcus had insisted on bringing Kira along to build character, whatever that means in human parenting, philosophy. Elena volunteered to accompany them, probably because she had run out of cliffs to climb. I joined the expedition because, well, someone had to document whatever disaster was about to unfold. My paranoia was not misplaced. We were mapping the eastern ridge of Goron Valley when we encountered them. The Shrikes. 6 of them, to be exact, each one standing roughly 3 meters tall with razor-sharp talons and beaks that could punch through military-grade armor plating. They were an apex predator species, highly territorial, and absolutely not something you wanted to stumble across while chaperoning a human child on a nature walk. Oh, those are magnificent specimens, Marcus whispered, because humans apparently lose all survival instincts when confronted with biological diversity. He actually reached for his recording device. Elena, to her credit, immediately moved in front of Kira, her hand dropping to the pulse weapon at her hip. "Back away slowly," she said, her voice steady, but tight. "Do not make eye contact. Do not run." The Shrikes noticed us. Of course, how could they not? We smelled like fear and poor life choices. The largest one, its feathers a deep crimson color that indicated it was the pack leader, tilted its head with predatory interest. Its eyes, multiple compound lenses that could track movement across a dozen vectors simultaneously, fixed on our group. It made a clicking sound, and the others fanned out in a hunting formation. "Telvik," Elena said quietly. "Get Kira and Marcus to the transport. Now." "What about you?" I asked, already knowing I would not like the answer. "I will buy you time. Humans and their self-sacrificial tendencies. I have written 3 papers on this psychological peculiarity alone." "No." Kira's voice was small but firm. "We stay together. That is what Dad always says." "Sweetie, listen to Elena," Marcus said, though he was still filming the Shrikes. I wanted to throttle him. The Shrikes began to advance, their talons clicking against the stone surface of the ridge. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate, terrifying. My survival instinct, which had served my species well for millennia, was screaming at me to abandon these insane primates and save myself. But then I looked at Kira. She was trembling. Her small hands clutched at her father's jacket, and her eyes, those enormous human eyes, were wide with terror. "I am scared," she whispered, and my translator chip made sure I heard every nuance of that fear. Something happened in that moment. Elena's jaw tightened. Marcus stopped filming and pulled his daughter close, and I, despite every logical impulse in my biology, stepped closer to the humans instead of away from them. "We do not leave anyone behind," Elena said, and she said it like a promise, like an oath, like something carved into the very genetic code of her species. The lead Shrike lunged. Elena fired her pulse weapon, the shot catching the creature in its shoulder joint. It shrieked, a sound that made my auditory membranes want to seal themselves permanently, but it did not go down. Instead, it became angry. Oh, you have not experienced terror until you have seen an angry Shrike. They are death-given form, rage wrapped in feathers and talons. The pack rushed forward as one unit. "Run," Elena shouted, firing again and again, but there were too many of them and they were too fast. We ran. Marcus scooped Kira into his arms and sprinted with a speed I did not know humans could achieve. I kept pace behind them, my forelegs pumping frantically, while Elena covered our retreat with disciplined bursts of weapons fire. But the Shrikes were gaining. They were always going to gain. This was their territory, their hunting ground, and we were just meat that had wandered too far from safety. The transport was still 200 meters away. We were not going to make it. One of the Shrikes broke through Elena's defensive line, circling around to cut off our escape route. It planted itself between us and salvation, its beak opening to reveal rows of serrated bone ridges designed for tearing flesh. We skidded to a halt. Trapped. Marcus set Kira down behind him, positioning his body as a shield. Elena moved to his side, her weapon trained on the Shrike but her ammunition counter flashing red. Nearly empty. "I have got maybe 3 shots left," she said calmly, as if discussing the weather rather than our imminent death. "Make them count," Marcus replied. The other 5 Shrikes caught up, forming a semicircle around us. 6 apex predators, 1 nearly exhausted human, 1 scientist human, 1 terrified child human, and me, a xenobiologist who was rapidly updating his will via neural link. The pack leader stepped forward, that same predatory head tilt, savoring the moment before the kill. Kira was crying now, silent tears streaming down her small face. She pressed herself against her father's leg and whispered again, "I am scared." And then, everything went sideways. There was a sound, a deep, rumbling, guttural roar that seemed to come from the valley itself, vibrating through the stone beneath our feet. It was primal, aggressive, the kind of sound that bypassed rational thought and went straight to the oldest parts of the brain where fear lives. The Shrikes froze. Their heads snapped around, searching for the source of the sound. "What was that?" I managed to ask. "I have no idea," Elena said, but she sounded almost hopeful. The roar came again, closer this time, and now I could see movement on the ridge above us. Something was coming down the slope, moving fast, and when it emerged into view I felt my circulatory fluid run cold. It was a Terran animal. I recognized it from the xenobiology databases, though seeing one in person was a very different experience than viewing holographic images. Stocky body, short legs, thick fur with distinctive white markings on its face and back. Scientific designation, Mellivora capensis. Common. Name, honey badger. "Oh no," Marcus breathed. "Is that," I started. "Is that one of those creatures that fights lions for breakfast?" "Yes," Elena said. "The ones that have been documented attacking crocodiles?" "Yes." "The ones that are considered the most fearless animals in the Terran ecosystem?" "Yes, Telvik, yes. Now shut up and do not move." The honey badger hit the ground between us and the Shrikes like a furry meteor of concentrated aggression. It was not large, perhaps 15 kilograms, which made it smaller than any single Shrike by a factor of 10. It did not care. It looked at the 6 apex predators surrounding us, looked at the terrified child behind me, and apparently made a decision that can only be described as choose violence. The badger roared again, and this time I understood why the sound was so terrifying. It was not the roar of size or strength. It was the roar of something that simply did not understand the concept of backing down, of something so fundamentally aggressive that it would fight the universe itself if given the opportunity. The lead Shrike, perhaps thinking this small creature was an easy appetizer before the main course, lunged at the badger. Mistake. The badger moved with a speed that seemed to violate physics, twisting under the Shrike's talons and latching onto its leg with jaws that locked like a vice. The Shrike shrieked and tried to shake the badger off, but the little mammal held on, climbing up the Shrike's body with its hooked claws, biting and tearing with methodical brutality. The other Shrikes tried to help their leader, but the badger was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of teeth and claws and absolutely zero self-preservation instinct. It bit through feathers, gouged eyes, tore at joints with surgical precision, and it was winning. "This is impossible," I said, watching a 15-kilogram animal dismantle 6 apex predators. "That is a honey badger," Marcus said, as if that explained everything. Infuriatingly, it kind of did. 2 of the Shrikes broke away from the fight, bleeding from multiple wounds, deciding that whatever meal we represented was not worth this level of violence. The others tried to regroup, but the badger gave them no quarter, pursuing them with relentless aggression. The pack leader, the big crimson one, finally managed to throw the badger off, but not before losing an eye and having its shoulder joint savaged beyond use. It limped backward, making a retreat call, and the remaining Shrikes disengaged, withdrawing toward the far side of the valley. The honey badger watched them go, making huffing sounds that might have been laughter or threats or both. It turned to look at us, blood on its muzzle, completely unbothered by the fact that it had just fought off 6 creatures each 10 times its size. Kira, who had stopped crying, stared at the badger with something like awe. "Did it save us?" she asked. "I think so, sweetie," Marcus said softly. The badger made a chattering sound, then wandered over to Kira with surprising gentleness. It sat down in front of her, tilting its head in what might have been curiosity. Kira, because she was a human child and therefore blessed with more courage than sense, reached out slowly and touched the badger's head. It let her. This creature, this absolute engine of destruction, sat calmly while a 7-year-old human child petted it like a domestic companion animal. "Good badger," Kira whispered. "Thank you for saving us." The badger made a contented grunt. "Okay," I said, my voice several octaves higher than normal. "Can someone please explain to me what just happened? Why is there a Terran honey badger on Terravex 3? How did it know we needed help? And why is it currently allowing itself to be petted by a child?" Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. "You want to tell him, or should I?" Elena asked. "Tell me what?" Marcus sighed. "Remember 6 months ago when I requested authorization to bring some Terran species to the colony for ecological studies? You said you wanted to bring earthworms. You specifically said earthworms. I did bring earthworms, and some pollinating insects. And, well, I might have also included a mating pair of honey badgers because I thought they would help control the native pest population. The native pest population is 2 meters tall. Yes, and as you just witnessed, that is not a problem for honey badgers." I sat down heavily on the ground, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. "You smuggled the most aggressive animals in the Terran ecosystem onto a research colony without proper authorization. Technically, they were authorized, just not explicitly detailed in the manifest. That is the definition of smuggling. In my defense," Marcus continued, "they have been very effective at pest control. The razorback population is down 40%. The razorbacks are armored predators. Not armored enough, apparently." Elena was trying not to laugh. She was failing. The honey badger, still being petted by Kira, looked at me with what I swear was smug satisfaction. "This one is named Brutus," Kira said happily. "I have been feeding him dried fruit near our habitat module. He is my friend." "You have been feeding it?" "Kira, that is incredibly dangerous. Brutus would never hurt me. He is nice." I looked at Brutus, who was currently cleaning Shrike blood from his claws. "Nice," I repeated flatly. "To be fair," Elena said, "he did just save all our lives." This was true. I could not argue with this. The small, aggressive mammal had indeed prevented us from becoming Shrike lunch. "Can we go home now?" Kira asked. I want to draw a picture of Brutus being a hero. Marcus picked up his daughter, finally showing some appropriate parental caution. I think that is an excellent idea. We made our way back to the transport, Brutus following at a casual distance. The entire walk back, I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to reconcile what I had witnessed with my understanding of biology, physics, and common sense. We reached the transport without further incident, though I noticed several more Shrikes watching us from a distance. They did not approach. Word had apparently spread about the small Terran demon who fought for the humans. As we lifted off, I looked down at the valley where we had nearly died. Brutus was visible below, wandering back toward whatever den he had made for himself, probably going to take a nap after his casual dismantling of 6 apex predators. You know I have to report this, I said to Marcus. I know. The council is going to have questions. Many questions. I know. They might even impose sanctions on the human exchange program. That would be unfortunate, Marcus said, not sounding particularly worried. Kira was already drawing, her earlier fear forgotten, creating a colorful picture of a honey badger roaring while Shrikes ran away. She hummed while she worked, completely at ease. That is when it hit me. The real revelation. It was not about the honey badger, though that creature was certainly noteworthy. It was about what happened when Kira whispered, I am scared. The badger had answered. Not because it was trained, not because it expected reward, but because a child was frightened, and something in its small, aggressive brain decided that was unacceptable. Humans, I have learned, inspire loyalty in the strangest creatures. They form bonds that cross species barriers, that defy logic, that turn ordinary animals into heroes. And sometimes, when a human child whispers that they are scared, the universe itself seems to pay attention, even if the universe's answer comes in the form of a 15-kilogram ball of teeth, claws, and absolutely no fear whatsoever. I started writing my report as we flew back to the colony. By my calculations, this incident would generate at least 5 research papers, 2 ethics inquiries, and 1 very uncomfortable conversation with the Galactic Council about humanity's tendency to weaponize friendship. Telvik? Kira's voice interrupted my thoughts. Yes, small human? Do you think Brutus would like some more dried fruit tomorrow? I looked at her innocent face, at her father's sheepish expression, at Elena's barely suppressed grin. Yes, Kira, I said, surrendering to the inevitable chaos that surrounded humans. I think Brutus would like that very much. She beamed at me, and I realized with some horror that I was smiling back. Humans. They will be the death of me, or possibly my salvation. With humans, those 2 options are distressingly difficult to tell apart. The council hearing was scheduled for 3 days after the incident. 3 days. That gave me barely enough time to organize my findings, prepare my defense of Marcus's unauthorized ecological experiment, and file approximately 17 supplementary reports about the behavioral patterns of honey badgers when bonded with human children. I did not sleep during those 3 days. Kevrithians do not require as much rest as humans, which is fortunate, because the sheer volume of documentation required to explain what happened in Goron Valley could fill an entire data archive. The hearing was held via quantum link, with representatives from 5 different species watching from their respective homeworlds. I recognized Ambassador Threll from the Drenali Commerce Guild, High Arbiter Zenton of the Pulthan Confederacy, and 3 others whose names I immediately forgot because I was too busy trying not to have a nervous breakdown. Xenobiologist Telvik Moore, Ambassador Threll began, his translation matrix giving his voice an oily quality that made my skin prickle. Please explain to this council why a Terran predator was allowed to exist on a research colony without proper containment protocols. I cleared my throat, which is difficult when you have 3 of them. Honored Ambassador, I was not aware of the animal's presence until it saved our lives. Saved your lives, Threll repeated, his ocular stalks waving in what I had learned was skepticism. You are claiming that a creature weighing less than 20 kilograms defended you against multiple Shrikes. Not claiming, Ambassador. Stating as documented fact. I have full sensor recordings of the incident. I transmitted the data file. There was a long pause while the council members reviewed the footage. I watched their reactions carefully, noting the way Zenton's facial plates shifted in surprise, how Threll's stalks went rigid with shock. This is, Zenton said slowly, highly irregular. That was putting it mildly. The creature displays combat efficiency that exceeds its physical parameters, another council member noted. Its aggression quotient is off all standardized scales. Yes, I agreed. That is what honey badgers do. They are, by Terran ecological standards, essentially concentrated chaos in mammalian form. And the human, Marcus Webb, brought 2 of these creatures to the colony. A mating pair, yes, though I should note that they have produced offspring. We currently estimate the colony population at 6 honey badgers, possibly 7. The silence that followed was deafening. 6, Threll finally said. Possibly 7, I repeated helpfully. On a research colony with minimal security protocols. In my defense, they have significantly reduced the native predator population. Colony safety has actually improved since their introduction. This was technically true. The razorbacks that used to raid our supply sheds had mysteriously vanished. The Shrikes now avoided our sector entirely. Even the spine worms, which normally burrowed through foundation materials, had relocated to less badger-infested territories. Xenobiologist Moore, Zenton said, and his tone suggested I was not going to enjoy what came next. Do you understand that introducing non-native species without proper authorization violates Galactic Ecological Preservation Act, subsection 47, paragraph 12? I do now. Yes. The penalty for such violations includes immediate termination of research privileges, possible criminal charges, and mandatory relocation of the offending species. My stomach, all 3 of them, dropped. Relocation? You want to remove the honey badgers? That is standard protocol. But they bonded with the humans, specifically with the child, Kira Webb. Removing them would cause significant psychological distress to both the animals and the humans. Threll made a dismissive gesture. The emotional states of research personnel are not our primary concern. That was when I heard the door to my office open behind me. I turned, already knowing what I would see and dreading it anyway. Marcus stood in the doorway, Kira beside him holding his hand. Behind them, Elena loomed with her arms crossed, and an expression that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. Telvik, Marcus said, quietly. We heard about the hearing. You should not be here. This is a closed council session. We need to testify, Elena said. That is not how this works. But Marcus was already moving forward, positioning himself in view of the quantum link camera. Kira stood beside him, looking impossibly small but somehow fierce. Honored council members, Marcus began, and I had to admire his composure. My name is Marcus Webb, and I take full responsibility for bringing the honey badgers to Terravex 3. We are aware of your identity, Human Webb, Threll said coldly. Your actions constitute a serious violation of established protocols. I understand that, Ambassador. But I ask you to consider the results of those actions before making your decision. The results are irrelevant. The law is clear. The law exists to protect colonies from dangerous invasive species, yes? Marcus did not wait for an answer. In the 6 months since the honey badgers arrived, colony injuries from native predators have dropped to 0. Before their arrival, we averaged 2 serious incidents per week. The honey badgers have created a defensive perimeter that our security systems could not match. That does not excuse unauthorized introduction of aggressive predators. They are only aggressive toward threats, Elena interjected. They have shown 0 hostility toward colony personnel. In fact, they display protective behaviors toward humans, especially children. Kira stepped forward then, her drawing clutched in both hands. Brutus is my friend, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the quantum link. He saved us when the big scary birds attacked. He roared, and they ran away, and nobody got hurt because he was brave. I watched the council members, noting how their postures shifted. Zenton's plates softened slightly. Even Threll's stalks lowered a fraction. Child, Zenton said gently, We understand you have formed an attachment to the creature, but the Council must consider the broader implications of allowing such animals to remain. What implications? Kira asked with the blunt honesty only children possess. Brutus and his family make everyone safe. They eat the bad bugs. They scare away the mean animals. And they let me pet them when I am sad. Why would you take them away? Because rules exist for a reason, young one. But rules should help people, right? Not hurt them? There was a pause. I could practically hear Zenton trying to formulate a response that would satisfy a 7-year-old's logic without undermining the entire galactic legal framework. He failed. The matter is more complex than that, he said finally. It really is not, Marcus said quietly. You have two choices. Remove the honey badgers and return us to a state where colonists are regularly injured by native predators, or acknowledge that sometimes unauthorized actions lead to positive outcomes and adjust your regulations accordingly. You are suggesting we reward your entry. Violation of established law? I am suggesting you prioritize outcomes over procedure. Threll's stalks quivered with indignation. If we allow this precedent, every colonist will think they can introduce whatever species they wish without oversight. Then make it part of the oversight, Elena said. Review the ecological data, assess the actual impact, and create a framework for evaluating successful integrations instead of automatically penalizing them. I found myself nodding along. When had I started agreeing with the humans? The honey badgers have objectively improved colony safety, I heard myself saying. As the resident xenobiologist, I would be negligent not to recommend their continued presence based purely on empirical results. Threll turned his stalks toward me. You are supposed to be impartial. I am being impartial. The data supports their retention. My personal feelings about humans smuggling aggressive mammals onto research colonies are irrelevant compared to the statistical evidence. This was mostly true. I was only slightly lying. The council members conferred among themselves, their audio muted. I watched Kira, who was now showing her drawing to the camera, explaining in detail how Brutus had chomped the scary birds and was the bestest badger ever. Finally, the audio reconnected. We have reached a preliminary decision, Zenton announced. The honey badgers may remain on Terravex Three under the following conditions. First, Marcus Webb will face formal censure and a fine of 5,000 credits for unauthorized species introduction. Second, all honey badgers must be fitted with tracking devices and monitored continuously. Third, a full ecological impact study must be completed within 6 months. Fourth, this case will not set precedent for future introductions without prior council approval. I felt tension I did not know I was carrying drain from my body. However, Threll added sharply, if there is any incident involving the honey badgers attacking colony personnel, they will be removed immediately, and Marcus Webb will face criminal charges. Is this understood? Completely understood, Ambassador, Marcus said. Thank you. Kira bounced on her toes. Brutus gets to stay? Brutus gets to stay, Zenton confirmed, and I swear his facial plates arranged themselves into something resembling a smile. The quantum link disconnected. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Kira threw her arms around her father's waist, laughing with pure joy. Elena clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. Well done, Telvik, she said. I did nothing. You three argued the case. You supported us when you could have thrown Marcus under the transport. That matters. Marcus extended his hand toward me, that peculiar human gesture of respect and gratitude. I stared at it for a moment, then carefully clasped it with my primary manipulator. Thank you, he said simply. Thank Brutus, I replied. He did most of the work. That evening, after filing the 17 supplementary reports that the council decision generated, I found myself walking toward the eastern habitat modules where the Webb family lived. I am not entirely sure why I went. Professional obligation, perhaps, or curiosity about how humans processed near-death experiences followed by bureaucratic victories. Or maybe I was just starting to understand why these primates collected friends from every species they encountered. I found them outside, in the small garden Marcus had cultivated. Kira was sitting on the ground, and Brutus was indeed there, along with what I assumed was his mate and 3 smaller versions of himself, baby honey badgers. They were wrestling with each other, making chirping sounds, occasionally tumbling into Kira, who would laugh and gently push them back. The adult female watched carefully but allowed the interaction to continue. Marcus saw me approach and waved. "Telvik, come meet the family." "I am not sure that is wise. Brutus knows you now. You are part of the pack." "I am absolutely not part of any pack, especially not a pack of hyper-aggressive mammals. But I found myself walking closer anyway, because apparently humans are contagious and I had caught whatever madness they spread." Brutus looked up at my approach, sniffed the air, then made a chuffing sound that might have been acknowledgement. He did not attack, which I chose to interpret as friendship. "See," Kira said brightly. "He likes you. He tolerates my presence because I was there when you were frightened. That is not the same as liking me." "You saved me too," Kira said, and her sudden seriousness caught me off guard. "You stayed when you could have run. That makes you brave." I was terrified. Being brave means being scared but staying anyway. Dad told me that. I looked at Marcus, who shrugged with typical human casualness. "She is not wrong." One of the baby badgers waddled over to me, sniffing at my lower limbs with obvious curiosity. It made a squeaking sound, then attempted to climb up my leg using claws that were already impressively sharp. "Oh no," I said. "Absolutely not. I am not a climbing structure for infant predators." Elena appeared from around the habitat module, carrying a container of what I recognized as dried fruit. "Too late, Telvik. You have been adopted." "I refuse adoption." But the baby badger was now perched on my thorax joint, making contented humming sounds. Marcus was recording this on his device, grinning widely. "This is going in my research archives as evidence of successful interspecies bonding. I am filing a complaint." "Sure you are." I was not going to file a complaint. We all knew it. The baby badger curled up against my carapace and apparently decided I was an acceptable sleeping location. Its tiny heartbeat was rapid against my sensory nodes, its body warm and surprisingly trusting. "What is this one's name?" I asked, surrendering to the inevitable. "That is Pebbles," Kira said. "She is the smallest and the cuddliest. Honey badgers are not cuddly. Pebbles is." I looked down at the small creature now snoring softly against my chest. "This is undignified." "This is progress," Marcus corrected. 6 months ago, would you have believed you would be standing here with a baby honey badger asleep on you? 6 months ago, I had dignity and a reasonable worldview. Overrated on both counts, Elena said, handing me a piece of dried fruit. "Here, feed Brutus. He loves these." I am not feeding the apex predator, but somehow the fruit was in my hand, and Brutus was looking at me with what might have been expectation, and Kira was watching with those enormous eyes, and before I knew what I was doing, I was offering the fruit to an animal that could disassemble a Shrike. Brutus took it gently from my manipulator, his teeth never touching my skin, then made a pleased, chattering sound. "Good job, Telvik," Kira said encouragingly. "Now you are really part of the family." I sat down heavily on the ground, careful not to disturb Pebbles, and accepted that my life had taken a turn I could never have predicted. 3 months later, I submitted my comprehensive report on the ecological impact of Mellivora capensis on Terravex 3. The findings were, even I had to admit, remarkable. Colony safety had improved by 93%. Native predator populations had reached sustainable equilibrium levels. Psychological stress among colonists had decreased significantly, and somehow, impossibly, the honey badgers had become unofficial colony mascots. The council approved their permanent residency without further debate. I also submitted a secondary paper, titled Behavioral Analysis of Human Child and Honey Badger Bonding Patterns. It has been cited 47 times in xenobiological literature, and sparked an entirely new field of study regarding human capacity for interspecies loyalty formation. Kira is 9 now, by human reckoning. She still feeds Brutus dried fruit every evening. The honey badger population has stabilized at 12 individuals, each one serving as a voluntary guardian for different sections of the colony. Marcus's garden has expanded significantly. Elena has taken up teaching self-defense classes and insists on including a section about learning from honey badger tactical aggression. I have stopped arguing with her about proper terminology, and I, Telvik Moore, Cavrithian xenobiologist, have become what humans call a friend to an entire family of the most fearless creatures in the known galaxy. Sometimes, late at night when the twin moons are high and the colony is quiet, I think about that moment in Goron Valley when Kira whispered she was scared. I think about the roar that answered her fear, about the small creature that decided a child's safety was worth fighting 6 apex predators. I think about humans and their inexplicable ability to inspire loyalty across every boundary evolution has created, and I think that perhaps the galaxy is a better place for having these chaotic, sarcastic, brave, ridiculous primates scattered throughout it, making friends with impossible creatures and turning predators into protectors through nothing more than kindness and dried fruit. My final report to the council included a single recommendation that I stand by completely. Do not underestimate humans, I wrote, and never, under any circumstances, threaten their children, because somewhere nearby, there is probably a honey badger who considers that child family. And honey badgers do not negotiate. Kira just sent me a new drawing. It shows me with pebbles on my shoulder, standing next to Brutus and the whole Webb family. We are all smiling in the picture, even the honey badgers. I have it hanging in my office now, right next to my 17 research citations and 3 commendations for advancing interspecies cooperation studies. Some days I look at it and marvel at how much my life has changed since 3 humans and their unauthorized ecological experiment entered my carefully ordered world. Most days I just smile and wonder what impossible thing they will do next. With humans, you never quite know.